Stephanie,
Hi.
how did I start it? I didn't mean to start.
Oh my gosh, look where we are.
How are you? How was your weekend?
Good. Yeah, it was good. My daughter and I went to one of those like dinosaur museums.
What the what?
Like those dinosaur like parks kind of thing. And we learned something there. Do you know why dinosaurs can't clap their hands?
No, I don't.
Because they're extinct.
Oh, that's a good point. It sounds like you had a better weekend than I did. I had a terrible weekend. I accidentally on Saturday, my wife asked me for her lipstick and I handed her a glue stick and she hasn't talked to me since.
I'm sorry, Holly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to everybody that you have to
All right, let me open this thing. When everything's falling apart, I'm going to set you up. Should you pretend to have all of the answers or admit that you're human? Shocking stat, Harvard Business Review in 2023 found 73% of employees trust leaders more when they admit uncertainty during a crisis. Slack founder Stuart Butterfield discovered this truth during the 2014 pivot crisis when he publicly shared his doubts about their direction. Team morale actually improved because they finally felt heard. This vulnerability paradox shows that authentic uncertainty builds stronger teams than fake confidence. Today on How to Founder, we'll be talking about leading through a crisis. I've led through a couple. How about you, Steph?
Oh no, nothing ever goes wrong over here.
No, okay. So we'll have a fresh perspective on how to completely avoid crises.
I lived through the .com era. Like that was, and like I know that sounds funny, but actually, we had people like taking their own lives.
It doesn't. So. It was a rough time.
Yeah.
All right. On that bright note, I'm going to introduce. I'm going to introduce Holly, 15-time best-selling author and founder of 11 Ventures. Holly Porter turned 2 near-death experiences into a mission. She leads Adventure Bucket Wish Foundation, proving vulnerability builds stronger teams than invincibility. Holly, hello. Thank you for being here. Thank you for jumping on and talking about a subject that a lot of founders. It's one of those things that you never know you need to know until you really need to know it.
Yeah. And it sounds like we're really lucky to have you after 2 near-death experiences. I can't wait to dive in and hear more about that. Jeez.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Well, we all suffered from COVID. I just suffered a little more. I had a 70-day hospital stay and Whoa. I was 2 intubations and had a trachea and sepsis and many days. So I had out-of-body experiences. And then I had the spiritual experience and then a near-death experience all in about a 3.5 out of the 70-day week time. So I got some clear direction. I'm supposed to be here. I feel very blessed and grateful that I survived all that. It hasn't been fun. It's been a long journey back, but here I am.
Wow. Well, we're lucky and grateful and thankful that we're here to talk to you today.
Thanks. So tell us a little bit about, what does a crisis look like for most founders? Like, not everything's a crisis, but there are some I would call it crisis could be something that could kill your company, but I'd love your definition of it. And then what should leaders do? Like, what's the first, second, and third things leaders should do when a crisis hits their company?
Yeah. Oh, first, second, third. Well, okay. First question. I would call a crisis, to me, it's a pivot or a detour. I feel like it's an opportunity for you to learn a lesson that you're getting, and how are you going to handle that? And so you can fall apart, or you can take that crossroad and decide there's a choice to make. One's right, one's wrong, maybe neither. And just stand in your leadership, and it gives you that opportunity for growth for that as well. And I think it's just making those decisions on how are you going to handle it. And it all goes back to me to a personality style and how we pick and choose and how we're going to pivot in that crisis. And what was the second question?
Oh, well, so before we move on, you kind of had a definition of it. If it sounds like an opportunity, I want to challenge you on that just a little bit and say sometimes it hits the fan and like it's hard to see the opportunity. Like it really damages the business. You know it's going to damage the business. You know it's going to hurt. What's the first? So first of all, tell me if I'm wrong there, right? But some maybe everything's an opportunity, and I just see it. I don't see it that way. So I'll stop there and let you kind of respond to that.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong in that answer. It's just my personal feeling around it. Like, for instance, when I went into the hospital, I had a brand new company. It wasn't incorporated yet. And I had pitched the day I found out I had COVID. I was sicker than a dog. And I pitched about 9 people on a Zoom. And I wanted to partner with them with this whole new tech idea because I hadn't had a tech found startup company. So I pitched to them. They had a billionaire backer. So I was super excited about that. Thought this would just fly and take off real quickly. And then I end up in the hospital for 70 days. But in my near-death experience, I was told not to partner with them, that it wasn't the highest and best thing to do, and that I needed to carry it on myself. It would take me longer, and it has. But I listened, and there were so many like miracles and things that dropped after that. So when I was in it, of course, I'm devastated because I was so excited, and then I started getting all the health problems after that. And working through that, I incorporated the company within 3 months. Then I had all these comebacks. Then I had all these setbacks. And so to me, when you talk about a crisis, I almost lost my life. That was probably the biggest crisis I've ever had. And then follow that, the 2 years after that were like the worst 2 years of my whole life as a person and as a wishing I would have just died because everything that could have went wrong, every bad day I had ever had, every divorce, every bad situation times 100, I was living for 2 years. And so to me, when you talk about crisis, it's like, I don't know if I'll ever top that period of time in my life to really figure out and look at it as an opportunity. I can give up or I can keep pushing forward, and how you handle it really defines character. So that's probably too long of a definition for you, but that's kind of my thinking behind it.
No, Stephanie, why don't you jump in here and how would you define a crisis for a company?
Well, I think what Holly's saying is actually kind of interesting because, well, it's interesting for a lot of different reasons. Is that there's two sort of sources of crises, right? Like what Holly experienced was a personal crisis that affected her ability to be involved with her business. And then there's also the business crisis, like the business is in crisis. And they're two separate circumstances that require you to both show up in a certain way. And so I'm wondering if there's like a difference in the way that we can process and handle and think about both of those things. That, like, how did you get through that crisis? How did you, what were you doing to ensure that your presence of mind and that you're focused on, the fact that there will be an end to this?
Yeah, there were days I didn't think there would be because the long COVID set in after, which it was a brain disease. And so that long COVID fog and everything really affected me and decisions. And I feel like I'm not a fake it till you make it type person. I'm very vulnerable. I'm very transparent. What you see is what you get. As a leader, I feel like that authenticity, I hope, comes through to people and they understand, look, my life's not perfect, but I'm going to do the best I can with what I have. And I just had to be honest. There were days that I didn't function as well. And I really felt like, look, I didn't want to get in front of somebody that I was going to fall apart on. I was an emotional wreck, a physical wreck, and a mental wreck, I would say, all at once. And so I had to say, look, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, my near death was very clear what I'm supposed to be doing. I had the end result. How many people get that? I had the second chance and I didn't want to waste a day. And so it was just figuring out all that stuff in between. And the team, when you have a team and there's people counting on you, I had to reverse engineer everything, I felt like, because now my brain just was thinking differently. Usually I was super sharp and I could just come up with solutions because I'm very solution based. And a lot of that was almost paused. And so for me, it just was the thinking and counting on having the right team in place and hoping they're not going through a crisis of their own, life or business. Because when I do business coaching, it always comes back to life coaching, because that's a lot of times, we all know that, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But here's what's coming up for me is that just last week I was on a panel with a couple of other business owners, and one of the ladies said, I think there's such a thing as being too vulnerable in your business, and I don't want to show up as a weak leader. And therefore, I think there's a limit to how much vulnerability you can show up with as a leader. And I'm curious your thoughts on that, because this whole concept of vulnerability is about creating connection and creating trust with your team and the people that you're going to need to rely on when you get into a place that you're either working through personal or business crisis. So what's your take on that?
I think there is a fine line, and there's a thing called balance. And I think when you are the leader, you can be vulnerable without giving them the sticky details, or, if it's a personal problem, you don't have to bring all those to the table. Just a blanket statement, or just being a vulnerable, hey, I'm struggling today. What for me, it was like, my brain's not working as well. It's not on fire like normal. I'm not as creative today, whatever, just to let people know, hey, this is my situation. But I don't have to say, oh gosh, I drove by my house today, and I live on a corner on a busy street, and I drove past my house because my directions are all backwards and I can't figure out where to turn home. I mean, they don't need to know all that. It's just, I'm just using that for an example that is true, but just saying, it's just figuring out in your leadership, you want to make sure that you're the boss. If you're the boss, act like the boss, but also be real enough to know that life happens, and people that don't understand that, maybe they're not your ideal team, or maybe they're not your ideal customers or clients. But there's a lot.
Well, Steph, I'm gonna throw that to you, because I think you nailed something that I had written down for later, actually, which is this notion of, yes, you want to be vulnerable, yes, you want to be transparent, but there is this notion of oversharing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's this like continuum between, and I've seen both of these things happen, but there's this continuum between enough, like sharing, being vulnerable enough that you create connection and trust, and everybody, like, I have always found that when I can share enough, everybody rallies behind what the problem actually is, as opposed to, not what it is. But then there's this other side of the continuum, which actually creates fear. And I've seen that happen too with leaders when they're I'm all about openness and honesty and direct conversation, because I think that's what gets us to a solution faster. But when there's sometimes too much of that, it can actually create fear in your team. And that's when people sort of jump ship, as opposed to rally behind the solution. So there is a little bit of like I don't subscribe to the idea that leaders should be stoic and always positive and always, the strong, like that's hard to maintain as a leader and as a founder. And it also doesn't give people chances to connect with you. But I do think that there's that sort of those ends of the spectrum, is like, how much do I share so that I can get people focused on the right problem? And like, there's probably creative thinkers out there that are going to think of something I didn't think of, if they actually know what the issue is. But then if I go too far, I don't want to create fear, and, what's the right, like, where is that right balance? So I think the bigger question here is, how do we develop that comfort with vulnerability as leaders? Because especially in our generation, men have roles and women have roles, and there's, reasons why women do and reasons why women don't, and there's reasons why men do and men don't, and those are all combined, like, affecting how we show up as people in leadership roles within our organizations. And I think there's often a narrative around weakness or not having all the answers, that kind of thing.
So if I can, I want to ask another kind of like get to the next level of this conversation. So now, okay, so crisis hits. What's the first thing that should be going through your head?
Me?
Holly, yeah. Go for it.
To me, I'm solution based. So in my head, I start thinking of all the scenarios of how how to look at something, because in the past, when I am emotionally attached to it or I am reactional attached to it, has not been the best way to handle things. And sometimes if it's something I really need to step back from, I give myself 72 hours, especially if it's something that's really put me in more of an angry position where I'm not happy about something. I want to deal with it, but maybe if I just sit back for 72 hours, if it's not urgent, I handle it better. And so for me, that's how it is.
I think that's real. So that's something I do as well. I don't know if I give myself 72 hours, but either on the high lows or the high highs, I give myself time to feel the feeling. Like I just let myself feel angry, right? I'm just like, but I time box it. I'm like, you can only feel angry for an hour, or if it's really bad, for a day. I can sulk for a little bit, but after that now it's like, all right, now you got to get over it. What are you gonna do about it? I find that very, very powerful. Stephanie, what do you think?
Well, I was first just shocked to hear that you had feelings, but beyond that,
I have one. Sorry, you're right. I have one.
Just the one. Yeah. Let's talk about your feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I will allow myself a moment of freak out. I will allow myself a moment of just feeling it and being like, I'm a verbal processor. So I'll start talking about it as soon as it happens with my sort of personal board of directors. And I may not have a solution at that moment, but I'm going to cry. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to do whatever. And then I just have I've developed this like capability now to just almost like self-govern that. Like there will come to a time where I'm like, okay, I'm done feeling this now. And now I'm focusing on solutions, but the talking it out, like, this is where you have to be okay with being vulnerable, and you have to have the people in your life where you can show up and say, this sucked. I just did a launch. We didn't sell anything. Let's put our heads around this. And then you bring
up something really important here, Steph, that I want. So first thing is you let yourself feel it. The second thing you did is you asked for help.
Yeah.
You talk to other people. I think that's really important. Having that network kind of already built in. But everybody has friends where they can talk, just so they can talk and vent and maybe get some solutions or ideas. Not that you should follow those, but at least you're talking through it. Holly, do you do that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I am definitely a verbal processor. And sometimes I think about, who am I going to talk to this about? Because say you have a list of 4 people. Sometimes you just want to vent. Sometimes you just need somebody that doesn't give you an answer. You just need someone to listen, because I'm my own processor. When I talk it out, I get the solutions myself. And so I don't always need someone else to give them. Sometimes I do. So I think it's good to have different team members or friends, personal friends, that can give you different.
Yeah, you got to be careful about you can't vent to your employee, right? You can't vent to your team. So it's I find it, you need to even have other founders that you can just call and go, what do I do? Right.
Yeah. Masterminds.
Masterminds one way. That's a formal way of doing it, or just being there for other people so that you have them there for you when you need them.
But there's another part of that, which is that I think is valuable, which is that not only are they there letting you verbally process, but they also have a whole network of resources where they can say, hey, I know somebody. Like that, hands down, has helped me every single time. Yeah. And so, Holly, if you think back upon your your experiences, I mean, you've had 11 billion startups and ventures. What do you find has been instrumental to you being able to maintain that maintain that ability to move through things much more quickly? Like, what has, do you have that network in place? Have you built your own sort of mindset practices, any tools that you have invested in, or like training or help that you've invested in to create that resilience? And I know that's something that people say to me all the time, you're so resilient. And I have to think about where that came from. And I think it's like about building perspective and about experiences, but also having these tools that I can use to, start working on the problem. But I think there's a big thing here too. Sorry. There's a big thing here too, which is learning not to like attach an outcome to narrative about you personally. Like I have failed, or I have, this is just good information. And how can I be curious about this as opposed to judgmental? Does it have to be good or bad? So like, where's the mindset stuff in all of this? Like, what have you developed?
Yeah. Well, personal development is like top of my list. I'm always learning. I never had I could have had a doctorate degree for all the classes and things I've taken over the years, but I didn't care about the paper on the wall. I cared about what I felt like I needed to learn, not what they told me to learn. That being said, I ran for political office a couple of times, and then I really realized that is not my journey. That like the loss I thought was so devastating was the biggest win I've ever had in my life. And then I started my personal development journey really full force and started writing books and started traveling and speaking. And I felt like it was a difference of forcing people and dragging them with you, or they're gravitating toward you on their own, that energy difference of just that shift in the personal development. Another thing you mentioned about how handling things when there's a crisis. The thing is, if it's a challenge with one individual, after you've done your little vent to your friends or asked for the advice or whatever time frame you gave, my 72 hours, by the way, is more personal than it is business. Business, usually I don't wait that long. But I feel like one lesson that I had to learn many times over the hard way was not going to that individual personally first, letting everyone else find out about it, or letting them find out from somebody else you're upset. I think that's been the biggest lesson, is just sometimes you just need that conversation, and it can be such an easily repaired crisis if you just go right to the source first. So for me, that would be my best advice, is figure out, and you can't always do that, but if it's something to do with an individual, why aren't you talking to them about it first before?
So what are some strategies?
Go ahead, Steph.
Yeah, go ahead. No.
Well, I just kind of wanted to mention, so, Stephanie, you mentioned it just before we actually went live during the .com burst. And I've known two founders in my inner circle that were dealing with a crisis, and they decided to handle it in the worst and ultimate way possible. And so I just think would be responsible for us to talk about that. There is, no matter how bad the crisis is, there's life after a crisis. Holly, you're a great example of that. And I've gone through some really bad, like I thought my life was over, like who I was completely shattered kind of crisis when it came to the business. Like I thought I was going to be homeless. I thought my wife was going to leave me, like all of those things. And just like give yourself a chance. Give yourself a chance to go find help. And there is help, and there is life after it. I just thought it was really important that we mention the fact that you can survive the worst kind of crisis ever. You can get through it. Sorry, so I didn't mean to stand on a soapbox there. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it. Stephanie, do you have any examples like that?
Oh yeah, I mean that's so real. Like we kind of joke about the .com crisis, but actually a lot of people lost a lot of money, and one of the people that I lost was my boss. He, we lost so much, and I think it was partially for him about money, but also partially about his own like sense of self-worth and
the shame.
Like it just all sort of
I totally identify with that.
And he took his own life, right? And then there was another fellow inside of our business too that did the same, because he had lost a bunch, or he just couldn't, like it was such a crisis, right? And everybody was so immersed in it, and it was really shocking, right? Because everything sort of came down all at once. And I absolutely agree, like to have the support around you, but also know that there is always life after a crisis, and you will be okay and you will get through it. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Holly, and shift direction just a little bit, like how do we structure things so that we, to the best of our ability, can avoid a crisis? What can we put in place?
Besides being organized, What I've
The
noticed,
best way to avoid to work through a crisis is never to have one.
yeah, right? In a perfect
Don't do
world,
it.
we all want that perfect world. I mean, they're going to happen. So what the saying, plan for the worst, hope for the best. I mean, that doesn't, I think just being organized, starting with yourself, first of all, that self-care, we got to throw that into what you were just talking to. No matter how busy you are, find time for your self-care. Mine became my healthcare. I had to choose. Do I get my hyperbaric for 90 minutes this morning, or am I going to go exercise? If I only had 90 minutes. And I think it's just like life's a choice. And if you never put yourself first and what matters, you're not going to be at your best to be able to handle the crisis in the first place. The other thing I love that I have learned was getting systems in place. So having my assistant, for instance, if they were learning their job, they would create, what do we call that? I missed for the word, the system, the
Risk management.
well, yeah, but they organize it. So like they actually create the document. What's it called? There's
Disaster recovery, business continuity.
it's a guide. Anyway, basically your job description, basically all lined out. So everything that they're doing, they're documenting. So if there is a crisis, I mean, you never know what's going to happen in someone's life. I mean, you just talked about several instances where everybody was shocked. That happens every day. And I'm just saying, when they leave, if you're up in arms and don't know where to look or where to go or what's next, or you hire somebody and they're starting all over all the time, that is policies and procedures. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Having those in place so that it's an easy way for someone to pick up and just keep things going. Because how many more crises are you going to avoid by not having that?
All right, now I'm gonna ask one more question here before we get into the speed round. We've been talking a lot about how you deal with crisis internally, both within yourself and within your team.
Yeah.
What about externally? How much do you share the journey of a crisis with your customers, your supporters, just the public at large?
Yeah, I'd say that's a little more fine line for me. I'm vulnerable, and that's a little bit different of a balance. I think internally, your team needs to know a little bit more than the outside world. When it comes to the outside world, you don't need to give them a play-by-play of how you're running your business and how horrible everything is today. I mean, there's a different, especially if that goes public or is published in some kind of media or on social media. Look how much damage can happen by that happening. So I think handling that definitely needs to be a case by case basis.
So I don't know if you've been following Stephanie the news, but Hala, you have. I'm sure you have. Pretend for a second you're the CEO of Cracker Barrel right now. What should you
I
be
was
doing?
just thinking of Cracker Barrel. Like, literally thinking about it.
I go
hide. Do they have Cracker Barrel in Canada?
No.
Okay.
No. But unlike you guys, we actually stay abreast of what's happening in the US.
Okay. Yeah. Fair
I
enough.
wouldn't want to be him. Let's just put it that way.
It's a
What,
woman.
the guy who's no longer on the logo, or the
the woman is the CEO is a woman of Cracker Barrel, and yeah, what would you be doing right now?
I didn't even know
Nothing.
It was a woman. Oh,
Nothing.
I mean, not really hiding. I'm joking by saying that. And I actually know there's something going on, but I don't know the whole story, to be honest with you. I haven't.
I think it's an opportunity for dialogue, and I think that they have the opportunity to actually move into a place where they can lead some of that dialogue. So they have an opportunity to create community and leverage the situation. Like, external handling of crises is about knowing your audience. It's about knowing what they want and what's important to them, and being able to shift the narrative so that it's got that right balance again of honesty and no, I don't want to say spin, but packaging.
Yeah, there's a chance to be vulnerable here from the CEO, right? The CEO, I mean, truthfully, let's talk about the error, right? The error that they made was not fully understanding how passionate their customers were about the current brand. Yeah. They were caught off guard. And I think you start by saying that, like, clearly, we've made some people upset with this rebrand.
But do you think that they were? Do you think that they didn't know? Or was it intentional?
No way they could have predicted this amount of outrage on the rebrand.
Bad publicity is good publicity. All publicity is.
No, Bud like that. That's not true. That is not true. That is not true.
I have seen as much. I have seen as much like bad publicity as good publicity. In fact, I just read an article about it.
You have for Cracker Barrel?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you must have a different X feed than I do.
Well, I'm sure I do, based on our conversation last week.
Fair enough. All right, we're gonna go ahead. So, Holly, are you ready for the speed round?
You didn't let her prepare. You didn't let her prepare. This is a crisis going into
the intro. The intro is like the getting prepared.
But it's like anxiety producing that
music.
And
yes, this is supposed to be like a game show. Like there's so much on the line. I want Holly. I want our guests to be nervous.
This is it, Holly. This is it. Everything's on the line for you.
All right, here we go. Share concerns to gain team ownership, or protect info to secure morale.
Oh, protect would be my first gut reaction.
So next one, admit strategic doubts to gain collective wisdom, or project certainties to secure direction.
First one.
Okay. Do you show personal stress to gain team support or maintain confidence?
Oh, depends on the situation. I'd lean more towards 2.
Okay. Ask for team input on decisions to gain buy-in, or decide alone to secure speed.
1 for sure.
Reveal past failures to gain learning, or hide mistakes to secure credibility. Ooh.
First one.
Yeah, that was a softball. Stephanie, what did you learn? What are our good founder fundamentals takeaways here from the episode?
Okay, so there's a difference between authentic and fake confidence, right? And in my mind, I think you can have a balance of like confidence that we can figure this out, but authenticity about what the problem really is. A crisis is an opportunity to learn a lesson. It's an opportunity to grow and evolve. Vulnerability is important for leaders, but there are levels that are motivating and levels that create fear. Have a personal board of directors, so these people that are going to be able to let you vent, process, and also connect you with solutions. Giving yourself time to feel and process before jumping to solutions is it's like that poor pressure release. I did a minor in physical geography. It's poor pressure release. And then stay organized, make sure you're taking care of yourself, and being prepared, having some type of risk management strategy is actually going to help you sometimes avoid crises that could happen. So those were my founder fundamentals.
That's great. I have a couple of deep dive resources, both by the same author, Breen Brown, Dare to Lead, and
Brené.
Brené. Well, yeah, you're French,
so of course you know it's Brené Brown.
Brené. I had no idea how to pronounce that. All right, Dare to Lead, and sorry, Brené, for mispronouncing your name, and The Power of Vulnerability. Holly, where can we learn more about you?
You can go to my website, hollyporter.com, or you can social media. I'm on all of them, some more than others, but all of them under my name too.
Awesome. Stephanie, why don't you go ahead and close this out?
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. Please be sure to visit us on howtofounder.com, where you can connect with us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the channels. We show up there every week, 3 times a week. And we believe you are the pioneer of economic prosperity. We're so grateful for you being here and being with us all along the way. And we can't wait to see you on the next episode.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.